Will she be at the
Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and begin. Today is November 21st, 2019, the HID Planning Council of New York. Welcome, council members, and to our guests. We will begin with a round of introductions. I'm Jan Clark, the governmental co-chair.
Matthew Lashare, community co-chair. He, him, his. Thank you, my dear.
David Klotz, New York City Department of Health, Planning Council staff, he, him, his.
Asia Bettencourt, she, her, hers, HID Planning Council.
Paul Carr, consumer at large, he, him, his.
Leo Ruiz, he, him, his.
Maria Diaz, co-chair, Tri-County Steering Committee, Planning Council Consumer Committee member, she, her, and hers.
Randall Bruce, co-chair of the Consumer Committee, and I don't use pronouns.
Thank you. Latif Abdul Haq, Planning Council.
Lisa Best, Planning Council, Consumer Co-Chair, Tri-County Steering Committee member.
Andy Strauss, Co-Chair, Tri-County Steering Committee, Hudson Valley Community Services.
Ben Schubert, he, him, his, Family Health Centers, and Emily Lingo.
Oscar Lopez, DS Brand.
Graham Harriman, New York City Department of Health, he, him, his.
Ronnie Fortunato, she, hers, Planning Council, and Integration of Care Committee.
Ronnie, can you take a different seat? I can't see.
Yes, I can.
5 people.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Donald Howell, co-chair, Integration of Care Committee, Fortune Society.
UC Health and Hospitals, she, her, hers.
Nebraska Needs Assessment.
Michael Rifkin, Planning Council, he, him.
Everyone, Malaya Manyako, she, her pronouns, Callan Lord Community Health Center, Planning Council and Needs Assessment.
Maitri Singh, Callan Community Health Center, pronouns are she, her.
Jeff Knapp, NYU School of Medicine, co-chair, PSRA committee. You could just call me Jeff.
Micah Domingo, Callan Ward Community Health Center, pronouns are he and him, and I'm on the Needs Assessment Committee as well as a member of the Planning Council.
Charlene Graham, Planning Council Committee.
John Shep, consumer representative, Consumers Committee, Needs Assessment Committee, IOC Committee, and full Planning Council. And just me.
Rob Walker, pronouns they, them, theirs. Planning Council member.
Melanie Lawrence, staff, she, her, hers.
Joe Cusero, parliamentarian.
Kimberly Mack.
Randall, will you lead us in a moment of silence, please?
Wait, what about these folks in the back?
Oh, I'm sorry. Those who are on the phone, please.
Bettina Carroll, Public Health Solutions.
Barry Dingman, Moniker Medical Center.
And a few people just came in, so why don't you introduce yourself?
Amanda Love, African Services Committee, co-chair, Committee.
Marcia Thompson, co-chair, Needs Assessment Committee, Alliance of she, her, hers.
Those in the public, please, if you choose.
Kimberly Mack. Kimberly Mack, DOHMH Planning Council Support Unit.
Stephanie Serafino, Health and Hospitals.
Adrian Guzman from the Health Department's Bureau of HIV.
Christina Rodriguez Hart from the New York City Department of Health, Bureau of HIV.
Terrence Erday, New York City Department of Health, Bureau of HIV.
Billy Fields, a member.
Anna
Thomas Ferrioli, New York City Department of Health.
Winton Wedderburn, Web Consulting.
Aisha Bird, Health Department, Bureau of HIV.
Julianne Bell, New York City Health Department, Bureau of HIV.
Erica Diabla, New York City Health Department, she, her, hers.
Destiny Hornberger, Department of Health.
John Lawrence, New York City Department of Health, Bureau of HIV.
Have we got everybody? Randall?
Jonathan Rebel, council member, P-Day.
As we take, as usual, let's take this time to remember those who have gone before us, and those of us who are here, making sure that those who can't speak for themselves do, and that we as council remember everyone that has gone before us, and hope that no one, maybe in the next few years, comes after us. Thank you.
So, Mr. Kloss, would you like to take us through the minutes?
These were sent out multiple times, didn't get any corrections, any changes, any corrections. No.
I don't have the sign-up sheet in front of you. Did anyone sign up for public comment? I'll take the blank faces as a no. Okay, so we'll move on to the recipient report. Is the grantee in the room? Oh, Miss Sarah, and there you are. But before you start, Graham, there's still some additional council members who have shown up since we did announcements. Why don't you say hello?
Faye Barrett, Ryan Health, the Chair of Rules and Membership.
Steve?
Steve Ramrod, Finance Officer.
Okay, sorry, Graham.
No problem. Give me a chance to adjust my chair so I don't have my back. So
Yes, but I can't see you.
the grantee report is in your packet. Please follow along. And I'm going to go through the highlights. Hersa announced their 2020 National Ryan White Conference on HIV Care and Treatment. It's taking place in Washington, D.C., August 9th through 11th, 2020. The most important part of this announcement is that call for abstracts, those are due December 20th, 2019. They would like abstracts that focus on population-based approaches for improving access, engagement, re-engagement in health outcomes, data utilization, innovative system-level models for HIV service delivery, clinical quality management, Ryan White, planning and resource allocation, community engagement, and collaborative partnerships, and then anything related to fiscal and grant management.
I know it's a little early, but I noticed they moved back to the Waterman Park, which is obviously a far more convenient location than where they had it last year, but it's definitely a smaller space. Have you heard anything around slots and what they're going to do?
They said that they are going to have, it's actually at the Marriott Marquis, not the...
Oh, the Marriott Marquis on Connecticut?
Yeah, it's a very large venue, and they'll be able to continue to allow the same number of people that they had last time. So that was good news. We did specifically ask that question of our project officer. Under page 2, Ryan White Administration, the core medical services waiver was approved. We received that notice from Hersa yesterday. So just for people who are new, the core medical services waiver is necessitated when our spending plan dips below a 75% allocation for core medical services categories, and ours is at 56%. So we submitted our waiver consistent about the same time as the Ryan White Part 8 grant application. We've received approval for every waiver that we have applied for, and we began applying for waivers in 2013. Later on today in the meeting, you will go through the estimated unobligated balance submission, and just to note that this is a Ryan White program requirement that's contained in the Public Health Services Act. We're required to submit an estimated unobligated balance to Hersa on behalf of the EMA, our grant area, stating that we'll make a carryover request once we know our carryover. So this estimated unobligated balance is due in December 31st, 2019. We don't submit it, we can't put in a carryover request, but Dave's going to tell you more later. The Power Quality Management Improvement Conference is on Monday at the Kimmel Center. It's an all-day conference, and I've heard there's some consumers that will be presenting on oral health. So that's exciting. We're excited to have you as a part of the day. That's great. In DHIV news, important news is that on October 30th, the New York City and New York State released a Dear Colleague letter stating that initiating antiretroviral treatment on the day of a diagnosis or first clinic visit is now recommended standard of care for HIV treatment in New York. This follows the New York State clinical guidelines and recommendations of the International Antiviral Society USA panel. A note that open enrollment for New York State Health was announced on November 1st and will continue through January 31st. There is contact information there for people who want to take advantage of open enrollment for New York State of Health. Also in interesting news, and I'm not sure if people who aren't involved in the prevention space know that this has happened. The Bureau of HIV convened its first ever micro-grant symposium. The event served as an opportunity to share more about our micro-grant initiative, which utilizes microfinancing to support grassroots community-based organizations to design and implement projects focused on building resilience, promoting sexual health as the essential ingredient in HIV prevention, and developing community leaders. Microgrants, and the reason that I think this is important is we've been talking about really ensuring equity, supporting the ability to engage marginalized populations, and I think this is a really important part of that effort. These grants are awarded to local communities to improve access to basic social health and family planning services. They allow CBOs to leverage their expertise in providing and building essential services in the community. So we did release our first one in October 2018 as a part of our effort to advance health equity, and it was developing community input with using an equity lens. So that's everything from the recipient.
Thank you. Go ahead, Adrian.
Just two notes.
Microphone, please.
I wanted to make a quick announcement. World AIDS Day 2019 is upon us. So on behalf of PHIV, I wanted to invite you to the End AIDS New York 2020 Coalition annual World AIDS Day citywide event. They work in collaboration with the City Health Department and the State Health Department. This year, the event will be at the New York Academy of Medicine on the Upper East Side. There'll be live performances, remarks by government officials, including our very own Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis and Dr. Omi Blackstock, as well as some moderated conversations with community members. We'll also be awarding 6 community partners our annual World AIDS Day awards. So hope you can make it out. That is Monday, December 2nd from 11 to 1 p.m. And lastly, also in commemoration of World AIDS Day, we are hosting our 6th annual Red Ball, which we put on every year along with the KP Coalition. So I don't know if anyone's been to our Red Balls. They're fantastic. The Red Balls are a fashion show and runway competition inspired by the KP ball scene, which is a youth-led subset of the larger mainstream house and ball scene, where people of all ages come together to express themselves through creativity, music, dance. We hope you will join us. It is Thursday, December 5th from 4 to 10 p.m. at the Brooklyn Expo Center in Greenpoint. It's free and open to the public, as is the World AIDS Day event. And we'll be sending out information and flyers on this. We'll send it to the Planning Council list as well. So hope you can make it and celebrate World AIDS Day with the Health Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. All right, so moving on to the next part of our agenda, we're going to have 2 votes, a discussion and 2 votes by the Priority Setting and Resource Allocation Committee. So I know Jeff is going to lead us in that. For those of you who are new to this council, I don't really see too many new faces though. This sort of goes to the core of what this council does, these decisions we're going to be making today around where to spend the resources we get from the federal government. So this is sort of the bread and butter of what the council does. And I'll now pass it over to Mr. Nat.
Hold on.
Yes.
So don't be a rubber stamp. Ask questions. If you don't understand what the process is, ask questions. Before you vote, ask questions. The voting procedure here is yes or no. There's no we do not abstain. You either vote yes or no, or you just don't vote. Those are our parliamentary procedures in that regard. During the presentation, as there are new members at the table, these are one of a list of things that you need to sign off on over the course of this year. Please ask for clarification, and I would ask the presenters don't make any assumptions with regard to using acronyms. We're all here to learn.
Thanks. Thank you, Jen. So we have a couple of things that we have to vote on today. The first one is reallocation of transitional care coordination funds to housing. This has been discussed ad nauseum for the past few planning council meetings. The transitional care coordination model was developed by the planning council in 2011 to improve the care of people living with HIV who are homeless and or unstably housed by facilitating access to care, housing services, and other support services. After rigorous review by multiple committees, the Integration of Care Committee, IOC, determined that the service was duplicative and in competition with short-term housing. By adding funds to the housing program, those programs can add the targeted outreach service of TCC used to conduct, as well as serve an additional 60 to 65 households with short-term housing and rental assistance. Last July, this past summer, the Planning Council voted that the TCC service model end and asked the PSRA, the Priority Setting Resource Allocation Committee, to consider moving the TCC funding allocation in whole to the housing services category. We discussed this at our meeting on Monday, and we all voted unanimously to support this. So on behalf of, well, first, are there any questions before I make a motion?
I just want to make a point of clarity. The IOC determined that the services were almost duplicative, and that by strengthening targeted outreach in the short-term housing model, they would be duplicative, and so could make up for any services that were lost by ending the TCC model.
What's the dollar value of this?
$1,443,228.
How many contracts?
It's going to be added to the housing programs. No?
So the 5 contracts that were under transitional care coordination would end in February.
Right.
4 of them are co-located with short-term housing contracts, but one of them is not.
Right, but to Jan's question, are there going to be any additional contracts added as a result of this?
No.
So there'll be no RFP process.
No.
That's my understanding.
Great.
How many clients are currently being served?
I don't have the number of clients off the top of my head, but
Can you use your microphone, please?
an RFP might happen if the IOC decides to look at housing as an entire service category. So if the IOC wants to take that on as a part of their work, then that would likely RFP would result.
But this would take effect, though, at the beginning of the 2020 fiscal year, which is March 1st, 2020.
This action does not necessitate an RFP.
Yes, and according to the presentation we got from Pam Farquhar, the Director of Housing at DOH, presented to the Priority Setting Committee on Monday, It will allow for an additional 60 to 65 new households to be served in short-term housing and rental assistance.
John, you have a question?
Jeff, can you repeat that number again, please?
The total amount of money?
Yes.
$1,443,200.
I heard you say $1,207. Okay, thank you.
Steve, can you join us at the head of the table? Melanie, can you please?
But first, I just want to say that we were told, the IOC was informed that no changes that were made to short-term housing would trigger an RFP. So even though we did do that work and did not look at the rest of the portfolio to complete it, that's what we were told. So based on the changes to short-term housing, no RFP would be triggered.
So the reason I'm asking these questions is this is not theoretical. This involves people, places, and money. And you are the stewards of all those things. You're the stewards of the people that are served through these contracts. You are the stewards of how well the agencies provide these services. You are the stewards of the amount of money that is allocated for this particular service category. It's $1.4 million. That's a lot of money. And so you need to be mindful of this. So in future presentations, when we talk about a service category and it comes to this table and you have to be asked to vote on it, all of those components should be presented to you. You should know what you're deciding on with regard to moving dollars, to affecting clients, to the number of contracts involved. You have the right to know that as the bookkeepers of this Brian White portion of the grant. And Jeff, I thank you for that presentation, and thank you, Graham, for adding some clarification.
John, you still have another question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Jen, for reminding me. When we agreed to this at the PSRA, it was being turned over to housing use as will. My question would be, is there any way of getting some sort of report as to how they did use it to make sure that the money didn't go more towards administrations and did go more to helping get housing?
Well, I think they're committed to 65 households with short-term and rental assistance, but we can probably ask for some sort of post-transfer of what happened. Go ahead, Melanie.
So at the end of the year, when we figure out, when PSRA receives like what was spent and you'll find out where that money went exactly. So when they do the assessment of the administrative mechanism, it will tell you where it can't go to admin things, only a certain percentage can go to that in each.
Like when the question was asked at the PSRA, it was said that they could do whatever they wanted.
No, well, I don't think
they had to use some of it for.
Right. There's a cap, there's a 10% admin cap that's in the law, so they can't spend it any more than 10%. 90% has to go to services. It's a valid question, though.
Also, the $1.443 million is all program money. So it's all money that's being spent for programs now. It's not part of the administrative budget that gets taken off the top of the grant award. So it's all program money that's funded, being used to fund transitional care coordination, and it will all be transferred to the housing service category to expand programs there.
Well, there is an administrative overhead in the operation of these dollars.
Yeah.
Paul?
From my recollection as well on PSRA, part of this is eliminating some duplication in services as well. So we're kind of actually becoming more efficient by doing this. So I just wanted to put that out that and then we're able to free up some of the money that we would be duplicating, and by doing that and combining these, we would be adding additional households.
Tim, you have your hand up?
That answers my question.
Okay.
Yes, Donald. And I think the other thing that we talked about when we were having the conversation in IOC is that some of the resources would also be put towards creating supportive services in the housing units as well, because there's some challenges around mental illness, substance use, and so that was going to be a piece of this as well.
Just to clarify, we wrote a new service directive for short-term housing in IOC. When we presented it to the recipient or grantee, we were told that it did not significantly change the way that program services are being delivered in short-term housing. Because of that, and because of the grantee's promise that they would strengthen targeted outreach in short-term housing, we have paused reviewing the Housing Service Directive, which has two other parts, rental assistance and housing placement assistance. Our recommendation then was to end TCC because of duplicative services and move that money over to short-term housing because you can actually house people in short-term housing. And even though TCC focuses a lot on housing, it doesn't have a housing specialist, for instance, as part of that service category. We are going to, as IOC, be looking at these standards of care for the rest of our lives and oral health. And so we will not be addressing housing, but when John brings up, like, is this money gonna go to short-term housing? That's where we'd like it to go, but it is at the discretion of those who run that program to put it where it's most needed. So if it's most needed in rental assistance or HPA, those are alternative uses for those funding dollars. Yeah, I think that clarifies everything.
Ball's in your court, Jeff. Go ahead, Graham.
I actually have a follow-up question to what Melanie just said. So if it is put into rental assistance, as an example, will that reduce the number of households that, the number of projected household, number of additional projected households that the program is in?
Jeff, I'm sorry, Graham.
So the number of projected households is based on what we will do with those resources. And just to also clarify that there are supportive resources in the supportive housing contracts. So those similar services to TCC will continue, like Donald had said.
Randall?
You people are confusing because I was at the meeting and you're asking questions to go answered at the meeting differently, but from my understanding, according to Pam, who was there who runs the housing program for the Department of Health, she said that all of the money goes into housing and they cannot put it all in one specific area of housing. It just goes into housing. She said it will increase the number of households that are being served by 65 units. But some of the money will also be used to what's the other one other than
rental assistance.
Yes, she said some of the money will also be used to boost the rental assistance because that needs a lot, some more cash. I'm going to use this because this is my understanding of it. Needs more money in it to boost what's there already because of the number of people that are in the program. It will bring it up to par so that nobody is behind in rental assistance. So that's what she said in the meeting at the PSRA committee. She said the bulk of it will probably be used for short-term housing, but some of it will be used to boost the rental assistance because it needs it.
Melanie, is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's
because of it's not because of the number of people, it's because of the high cost of rent. And to clarify, we did meet with the providers. All of them could use more support, for instance, like startup kits and funding for additional support services and improved coordination. But we are not making any changes to the housing portfolio at this time other than targeted outreach.
My question is the $1.4 million. Is the $1.4 million going to short-term housing contracts, or is it also going to short-term housing contracts and rental assistance?
That's not up to us. That's not, we fund the service category. The planning council funds the service category, which is divided into 3 parts, 3 programs: rental assistance, housing placement, assistance, and short-term housing. We give them the money and they divvy the money up as best as needed by the clients. So even if it goes to rental assistance, you shouldn't see that as not helping a household, right? So say we only see a 60-person increase in short-term housing households that are served. The other 5 households may be in rental assistance. Some of that money may be to bridge the gap between the fair market rent and what it actually costs to be in an apartment. So we may not see another 5 households, but we will see that we've kept people housed. So what Pam does is she tries to make the money stretch as far as possible and put it where it's most needed. We don't have the discretion to decide that the 1.4 million would go specifically and only to short-term housing. And you
Yes,
can
we
argue
do.
this point
Yes,
for
yes, we do.
Okay.
What's the total allocation, David, for the housing portfolio?
I don't have it at the top of my head, but it's about $10 million.
So $10 million. That $10 million is then divided up into these various components. But we don't send a check to the housing unit for $10 million and say, you figure this out. That's our job here. We can say a third of that $10 million goes to short-term housing, a third of that $10 million goes to the former TCC program, a third of that housing goes to housing placement assistance. We do have the ability to specify where those dollars are being spent, even within a category like housing, mental health, substance use services.
Yeah, I'd like to let Graham talk and to explain what the process is going to be, when and if we approve this.
So, what the Planning Council has the authority to do is to allocate to service categories. The Planning Council also gives us directives about how to spend that money, which is what Jan is referring to, but it doesn't say how much to spend on which subcategory of a service category to spend. So you could say you want to see short-term housing, emergency rental assistance, and housing placement assistance, and you want them done in a particular way to particular populations. That is the job of the Planning Council. The job of the Planning Council would not be to say you must spend 32% on housing placement, 38% on short-term housing, et cetera. So it's sort of a middle of the road between what Jan is saying and what Melanie's referring to, though everything Melanie has said is correct. But I also do want to say that when Pam was at the meeting, the PSRA meeting, she was very clear that the money would be paid, would be used for short-term housing and rental assistance because of the issue of the fair market value and being able to meet those needs of the program. So I believe strongly in Pam's ability to manage programs and ensure that we are housing the most people with our resources and supporting them in the very best way we can. And that is why we have the HOPA housing money with the Ryan White money so that we can use those resources efficiently. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Graham, for that clarification. This Pam person who is now the arbitrator of these dollars, who sits in a cubicle at 2 Gotham Street, has now taken this portfolio of funds and I know she is, according to her view of HOPA funding, Ryan White funding, other city tax levy dollars that provide services for people with HIV, she's determined by years of experience how these dollars should be used. And I'm okay with that. But you should understand that those $10 million are now in the hands of an individual who, using their best judgment, is saying, well, most of this money will go into short-term housing, but I can use some money over here. And she's not at this table. And she doesn't sit on the priority setting or resource allocation committee. And to my knowledge, she hasn't discussed this with our finance officer. So I'm just raising this question. This is my last day here. And I'm trying to bring you to a place where you should be asking these questions. You should be asking the question of why aren't the dollar amounts up on that slide? Why don't we know how many of these contracts are being served? Why don't we know how many people are engaged in this? So I'll leave this to rest and we'll proceed to a motion. But I'm saying there are some missteps here in bringing this to the council. And for you new council members, it's your responsibility, once you've learned the system here, once you've been through these committees, once you've been engaged with DOH, MH personnel, to know that these dollars do not rest in a single person's hand. These dollars do not rest behind an MPH, an MPA, an MPB, an MPH, an MP, you know, they don't, they rest in your hands. And so you have the right to ask these questions and know how these dollars are being spent and how people are determining how those dollars get spent. I don't know when we handed over $10 million to Pam and have left it up to her to decide where these dollars go. I do believe that you as a council can specify how much those dollars within that service category should be directed to a service.
Okay, so I see two hands up. I see Lisa, then I see Steve.
Okay, maybe speaking for some of the newer members, and this was done in July, so my memory is not as clear. I get a little stuck on the term short-term housing. I know that we've been over it. Where my concern is this, having heard the different statements around the room, is once it's turned over to a provider agency, and they meet that short-term housing, fill in, you know, check off all the boxes blank. What is short-term, and when short-term is over, do they phase people out by saying made a referral, now it's somebody else's problem, thank you for keeping
No, because under Ryan White, nothing is long-term, nothing is permanent. What the patient has to be recertified and reevaluated every 6 months though. That doesn't mean that they're asked to leave the program, but we can never call it long-term housing or permanent housing in Ryan White.
That I remember. I think what is triggering my question is the fact that I heard earlier something about that there's no housing specialist, and in the city and the boroughs that have low housing stock, it's just a little.
That's just in TCC. TCC did not have housing specialists. That was kind of so, but it was. TCC had a lot of issues in terms of So that TCC did not have housing specialists, but people were coming to TCC looking for housing. And so what makes sense is that people get the housing, get the support for getting housing that they need through the short-term housing service category. And we bolster it with additional funds.
So, this is a very interesting conversation. And I'm going to talk about the needs in the community. And I'm talking here about first-hand experience. For the last 3 years, I've been linking every client that I could answer that phone who are tested positive for HIV or referred for PrEP from every one of the Department of Health sexual health clinics in Crown Heights, in Flatbush Extension, in Chelsea, Morrisania. I've linked more than 600 clients to care. All these young people, the reason why they're infected is because they're couch surfing. And in exchange for substance use, drugs, and if we can, and I'm sure that this money should be for people who otherwise cannot get HACA if they're undocumented. And it's not about taking medication because every single one of these clients have become undetectable within 6 months. because I personally link them to care and I track them. It's not about transitional care of getting them. These clients get their Medicaid, they're tested positive, they take that medication from the Department of Health the same day as Jumpstart. They come to me within 3 to 5, 7, the linkage I have with the department is they get them into care within 7 days. 3 is the average. And every single one of them are crying for a place to live. And if we can't get them housing, all this transitional care, they are willing to go into care, they are becoming undetectable. Before they come to me, they're already informed the partner. So this is a new generation of people who are crying for housing. And if this money is not going to be towards paying for rent, it's a waste of time. Because that's not what the people are asking for. And I have a first-hand experience because let the Department of Health check with their sexual health clinic and see who have linked more than 90% of their clients to care. Especially in Crown Heights, at Flatbush Extension, Chelsea, and Mercedes. So I honestly, and I hear you here, because as I said the last time at this table, before I was eligible for Hersa, I had something called sustainable housing that paid for a basement apartment that was good enough for me, even though I had just come out of a coma. And so if we can decide how this money is going to go towards paying actual rent for people, we're just rubber stamping something that's given to us. And that's my personal view from what I've done with the clients that I've linked care. As I said, it's close to 600 patients within the last 2 years.
Thank you, Steve, for keeping it real. I see your hand up. Michael, did you have your hand up for a while?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask for a definition or an example of what short-term housing actually is.
Graham?
Short-term housing provides supportive short-term housing to folks. Hersa says that you're supposed to work to transition people to other housing within 24 months. But that is not a hard and fast rule. You are supposed to work to transition. No one is kicked out of housing. Many people have to stay longer because there isn't another resource for housing. So it provides support and it provides housing at the same time.
So it'd be like an SRO?
No. If I'm correct, isn't short-term housing, the lease is in the name of the agency, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So you're actually adding more capacity to agencies out there to rent new units, provide support to the clients in those units. Paul, you have your hand up, and then I'm going to ask us to sort of vote on this so that we can move on with our agenda.
We just wanted to, just a clarification, this might be more for Graham. Needs is doing a committee under SMI. And what if, say, and this is pathetic, or not pathetic.
For the rest of us here who are new, SMI means?
It's severely mentally ill, and it's something that needs assessment is looking at. And what if, and last month we had a Hersa, the deputy director of Hersa was here, and currently, we know their housing is overrun, and in there we're seeing a lot of people that are SMI, and they're living in SROs, congregates, and they're basically, and I don't like the term general population, but that's the easiest way to describe it. What if who are schizophrenic and pretty much permanent psychotic states, and what if we were to say, like down the line, SMI comes to IOC and says that they wanted to create a housing program. By doing this today, we would not have funding right now to go ahead and create
I suspect a lot of the people who are going to be in these programs probably already are SMI, but I think that's an interesting conversation to have at IOC, and we can worry about the money later, but I wouldn't want to hold this up just because you're going through a process that will take a little while. Now, this has been a great conversation, but I have not heard a motion from the committee, so we can still continue this conversation under a motion, but I'd like an emotion, please.
My last point of clarification.
Your last point.
Is that if someone qualifies for Hersa, we cannot fund them. So just think about who we're talking about. And supportive housing does support some people living with serious mental illness, and so that program does exist already for them.
All right, so, Jeff.
I just want to make sure everybody is clear about all this.
We can still have a discussion under a motion. I would like you to bring it up.
All right, good. On behalf of the PSRA committee, I move that the council reallocate $1,443,228 from the TCC program to the housing services category.
Second.
No second.
We don't need a second.
Gotcha. Not required. Now we're back in discussion. I would.
Sometimes people just need to.
So look at this, what's on the screen. And you came into this discussion with those words on the screen, defining the action that we're about to take. Now think about the last 15 minutes and what questions that have arisen. Those questions should have been anticipated on that slide. And that's why you're here. You're here to raise those kinds of questions, and if you have doubts about doing something like this, this is your moment. So this is what the part of the discussion is about, and then we'll move to a vote.
So I just want to make clear exactly what's being requested here. There was an exhaustive process that went through multiple committees that culminated last July in a vote by the full council to eliminate the transitional care coordination category. Notices have gone out, termination to those contracts. Those contracts will be over on February 29th, 2020. The money that was funding those programs, the $1.443 million, will then be unobligated, not committed to anything. What this council, what the Integration of Care Committee asked the Priority Setting Committee to do is reallocate that money starting March 1st, 2020 to housing. Pam Farquhar, the Director of Housing, came to the Priority Setting Committee on Monday and explained if you reallocate it to housing, it will be used for short-term housing and rental assistance to keep people in their homes because of the increase in the cost of apartments, and to provide additional short-term housing for up to 60 to 65 additional households. That's the sum of it.
Okay, so we now have a motion on the floor. We can discuss the motion. So Lisa, you have your hand up. You're going to discuss the motion? No? Okay. All right. I think we've had a very robust conversation about this. I think everybody understands what we're doing now, and thank you, David, for providing some great clarity on what exactly we're making a decision on. So I'd like,
it would have been nice if this Pam were here to share with us what David just summarized. Normally this process would have gone through the executive committee and then come to this council, and a lot of this discussion would have been ferreted out in the executive committee, and by the time it got here, many of these questions would have been anticipated, but they weren't. So that's why this discussion has taken the length of time that it has. And thank you, David, for that clarification, and we should move to a vote.
I thought you called your question. Go ahead, Lisa.
I'm recalling the recall. This is really on behalf of, we really have new people around the table, and some of us that have been here seasoned, and thank you, Jen, for pointing out what I think we're all feeling but not saying, that it is very hard to agree to something in this short description. What I'm asking is the short-term and transitional housing under supportive services, the leases are under the providers and not tenant to landlord?
That's correct.
Yes, got you. So at any point, what you're saying, once it's past us, those supportive housing agencies, the tenant or client has to be compliant within their guidelines to be able to keep the housing.
You mean within the agency's guidelines?
Yeah, because they're not going to be leaseholders. The agency is the leaseholder. They're just occupying the space. So if for some reason that person is out of compliance, the agency holds the apartment for a different client, but that person,
Well, I don't know what out of compliance would be. None of the programs apply in absence, only philosophy. So unless the client burns the apartment down, I'm not quite certain what that would mean. Right. I mean, you rent an apartment and there's, no one imposes rules on you. I'm not trying to debunk you what you're saying, but knowing most of these programs, I think the client would have to really do something really, really challenging for them to be asked to leave the program. Would that be correct, Graham?
That is correct.
Okay. So.
It does happen, let's just be clear, it happens. But the support provided by the DOHMH and the directive from Ryan White is to prevent that. Because if something happens, it's usually because of someone's mental health or substance use. And it can happen that you have a client that harasses other clients in the building. That would be an issue for removal if you couldn't figure out how to make the behavior stop. And so I don't want to, let's not say it doesn't happen, it happens. We try not to let it interfere with the client's stability.
Steve, and then I want to call a vote, please.
So, I'm a little uncomfortable with this vote, and this is my reason. How much of this money is going towards direct rental assistance? How much is going towards getting the client into those housing? How much money is actually paying rent? And how much money is administration or linkage?
That's up to Pam. That's up to Pam.
I've not been to these meetings. I'm very sorry. I apologize.
Yep.
But as we get older, we get a whole bunch of health issues that is happening.
So I guess I'm a little, I understand your concern, I understand your passion, I really do. But if what we've just been told by David and the grantee is correct, it's going to go to 65 units of housing. Whether it's in a supportive housing environment or rental assistance. I would. So, I mean, unless, Graham, do you have any final words on this before I try and engage in a vote on this?
I think most of the points have been covered, and I did want to reiterate that there is an admin cap on all Ryan White funding. That as an aggregate has to be 10%. We can do 11% with our contractors, but it can be no more than that. The reason we can do 11% is because the allocation doesn't take any admin.
So I would like to call a motion, because I'm looking at the time, and we still have another item to vote on, and there's still other things on the agenda. So, unless there's a real objection, I want to call the motion. All those in favor of the motion as presented by the PSRA committee, please raise your hand.
Can I call a question?
No. No, you can vote against it if you like. Okay, any of those opposed? I'm sorry, Steve, I just had to, we had to move on as well. So there is still one more item on the agenda, Mr. Nat.
I'm sorry, but before we go on, I just want to make a quick comment about Pam. She does an amazing job. She showed up to meeting after meeting to help explain this. She helped us create graphics that help facilitate our understanding of a very complex landscape. And so when Jan says it's up to Pam, it really isn't. Pam has to follow the same policies, guidelines, and rules that ensure that the money is spent effectively and efficiently. And even though she's not here because she wasn't at work today and I don't think she really needs to be here. Maybe we should have done a better job of bringing this information to committee. I don't think we should throw her under the bus.
I'm not intending to throw anybody under the bus. I am intending to call attention to the fact that there are stewards of this money that we vote on a budget, and the budget then goes to the Department of Health, and we trust the people in the Department of Health that those monies will be allocated in an appropriate way. There shouldn't be any question about that. And to think that $10 million set aside for housing is then decided upon by a team of people as to how best that should be spent based on other criteria, HOPA funding and city tax levy funding, I understand that those people are doing great work, but you don't know who these people are. And so if you're in a committee and you've gone through those presentations and discussions, you do. But the majority of you do not. And so I think that when we have a moment like this, that those people that have led us to this moment should be in this room to help clarify those questions.
I agree. So, Jeff, you have one more item we need to discuss and vote on. Would you please continue?
Yes, thank you. Following up on what Graham presented earlier, Hersa, the city has to make a proposal to Hersa for its anticipated unspent funding. So Hersa allows up to 5% of formula funds to be left unspent at the end of the year. The actual fiscal year 2008 carryover into fiscal year 2019 was $241,644, which is really a lot less than the 5% of the formula, which is like 0.3%. So by December, the council and the EMA, what is EMA? Eligible Metropolitan Area, thank you. Just for folks that don't understand what that acronym means. So the council and the EMA must submit an estimated unobligated balance to Hersa. This is notification that the EMA may carry over as much as 5% of formula funds. This notice allows the EMA to request the use of the actual carryover later when it becomes available. So, obviously this year we're going to be requesting up to 5%, but based on prior years, it was a lot less than that. The EUB request must specify the possible use of the funds and the unit cost, and ADAP has always been used as a placeholder. Everybody know what ADAP is? Okay. The PSRA and the council are not obligated to allocate the carryover as specified in the EUB request. The actual carryover for fiscal year 2019, which is from 3/1/19 to 2/29/2020, will be known after the closeout of the contract year, which is done in the late spring of 2020. When the actual unspent amount is known, the PSRA and the council will approve a final carryover plan for submission to Hersa for the use of the funds in fiscal year 2020, which is 3/1/20 to 2/28/21. On behalf of the are there any questions about that?
So I think we should explain that just in a little more detail. So basically, this is an application to Hersa that's a formality, just in case at the end of the year we realize we have unspent monies. We cannot then try and roll them over into another program if we've not in advance asked the federal government, if we have unspent money, this is how we'd like to spend it. And even when you vote on this, it's still just a proposal to the feds. If we find out we have unspent money, there will then be a real conversation about where to spend it. But if we don't ask for it now, and we do have unspent money, the feds say, thank you, it goes back to the treasury.
It's basically given Hersa a heads up of the potential amount of unspent money, up to 5%. That's it. We're required to do that. Like Matt said, if we don't, we lose it. We lose any of the potential to roll over any additional money.
It's a placeholder.
Exactly, it's a placeholder.
Randall?
And we don't get it back.
Right.
Once they take it, they don't put it back in. So if we don't do this application now, and we have unspent money, we don't get the money back the following year when we apply again.
And they reduce the formula by that amount.
And also just one other point of clarification. So when this is submitted to Hersa, the potential amount that we may ask to roll over up to 5%, we have to indicate how we potentially will be spending this money. And we're using ADAP as a placeholder. We're not required to use ADAP later on when it's approved, but for the purpose of this exercise, we are using ADAP as a placeholder and letting Hersa know that.
And in part, the reason we use ADAP is because we can specifically delineate how many drugs we spend it on. I know this is complicated, but this is all hypothetical. This is almost like just requesting that loan, not knowing whether you're ever going to use it.
So I can see now why this is confusing to new people. A lot has been said here that you're not experienced in. And I would encourage you to sit through a priority setting meeting 2 or 3 times, just to understand what these dollars are and how they're divvied up and how they're divided up and all the preconditions that come with the grant itself. It's a little bit time consuming to try to go through and explain each of these components. And that's the committee where you can learn that. So if you're new, I would encourage you to sit through those committees.
Are there any additional questions related to this?
So did you introduce a motion, Jeff, so we can have a conversation based on the motion?
I did not, but I can. On behalf of the PSRA committee, I move that the council reallocate what's wrong one, sorry, my bad. David provided some excellent clip notes for me to read. On behalf of the PSRA committee, I move that the council adopts the estimated unobligated balance request as presented.
Great, so there's now a motion. This is where we can have a robust conversation, or none at all. So, we had 100 hands up at the last one, and I have none on this one. Everybody understand that? Thank you, Tim.
Could someone elaborate a little bit where this estimate comes from? I see it's 3.1 million, which is about 3.3%. Who came up with that figure?
It's 5% of our formula grant award. Whatever our grant award is every year from Hersa, the estimated unobligated balance is 5% of that.
Yeah. So it's not off the 94 million, it's a smaller number.
And 5% of MEI.
Thank you.
Minority AIDS initiatives.
Thank you. I'm going to call up the motion unless somebody has any questions. Okay, all those in favor of the motion as presented? Any objection? Great. Good job, Jeff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for your input on this process.
Okay, now the fun starts. We have been spending the last year redesigning our website. And we've asked Winston to be here and walk through it with you. It's pretty much complete, and it will go active at the end of the month, my last day. And I'm very pleased to give you this moment now. Let me go through the presentation. If you have questions, feel free to ask. There's lots of new things in here, and I think that you're going to really appreciate the work that's been done.
Welcome to moving the Planning Council from the 18th century into at least the 20th.
Well, at least the 19th anyway.
Sorry, a little awkward here.
You have to put duplicate so that you can see the captions. So displays them. And then you could open that box up a little bit for people, and actually you don't have the correct name of the. Stanley, for the captioning, what's the name and what are the recommended size for the font? What's just the name of the event? Sorry, everyone. It's just like health, right?
HIV planning and HIV-P are capitalized.
It's HIV planning, one word?
Yeah.
With HIV-P capitalized?
Yeah.
HIV, here we go. And then if you could make the font size different. lower it.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's it. It'll, when, it should be, no, yeah, yeah.
Okay, I lost my other screen.
Sorry, everyone. We haven't smoothed out our technical prowess.
All right, so my name is Winton Wedderburn. I do work for the DOH in the Bureau of Sexually Transmitted Infection. I lead the NYC Health Patient Portal, where patients who go to the sexual health clinics, they get their results online. And yes, I have been cleared by the Conflicts of Interest Board to be here today. So I am the founder of Symposium Web Development. Our mission is to provide web development and promotion services that are exclusively tailored to meet the needs and resources of those working for positive change in society. So we use best practices in applying traditional social marketing techniques, basically marketing activities aimed at behavioral change that benefits the greater good. So we apply those to online marketing and promotion. And I founded Symposium because I noticed that people who was helping the heroes on the front lines, basically, they weren't taking full advantage of the data that was being collected on their website. They would create content that no one was reading, or they'd send out newsletters and didn't know how many people were opening those letters or can follow up with them. They launched like grant-funded online campaigns, but didn't know if the spending was maximized on the pieces of the website that would actually benefit the project. And I just saw that businesses who sell physical products could take advantage of likes and shares and comments and things like that to build their brand and push their message. And the public health sector didn't, and I think that's something we can fill in. So like I said, we do things a little bit differently. We lay down a framework for a website, so we don't really nitpick on the color scheme and things like that right out. We get the website online so you can see something that's tangible and you can work to develop it further. And then using things like analytics and tracking user interactions, conducting focus groups, we sort of iterate on the development of the website. So to start, we started out with the user research process like we always do, and April Moreno, she's involved in health policy and informatics, and I think maybe some of you here have spoken with her just to get some ideas of the current website, what the issues are, and where you can sort of develop the website. So you all have seen the current website, I'm sure. It's not visually pleasing, the images are out of date, information is not reaching everyone that may need to get that information. Sorry. And there's also some difficulty in finding information on the site. It's really buried on the current site, and you have like long lists of minutes that may or may not even be needed anymore on the site, and we tried to surface as much as that on the new site. Awareness and social media, basically awareness of the website and the things that the council does. There's not a clear message on the role of the site for the consumer, so it's really only speaking to potential planning council members or people who are in that vein. And people thought that social media would help bring a younger audience if we incorporated that somehow, but there was also the concern of HIPAA and consumer identity if social media is used, so we would like to address that as well. And then because we live in New York, there are so many different languages, it'd be great to even have the content translated into Spanish. With the solution that we provided, we can have multiple other languages and have them be accurate. So we'll see that as well. And accessibility for the disabled can include larger fonts, and in terms of other features for the disabled, solutions are not clear. So didn't really know how to address those situations, those issues for people who are so our solution, go through this. and you have to bear with me, at the very last minute, as it happens, we caught a bug, and some of the pages we have trouble loading. So what I did across the top here, I'll just tab to the actual pages, but on your phones, if you'd like to follow along, you can go to that website. That's just a staging website right now. It's council.stg.wpengine.com, and it's a much different experience on the mobile phone. So, council, stg.wpengine.com. And the bug, if you notice, if you click on something, the blank screen will come up. You just have to refresh the page. Here on the home page, we already noticed that we've taken advantage of the full screen now. It's just not this small box in the corner. And the slider area here, this main area, I'm pretty sure everyone's seen the modern day website now. This area can maneuver left and right, but you get to hit people with pertinent information right away. It's also interactive. If we click this button here, it will bring you to the new calendar. Here, because the description of the website or of the planning council was sort of buried in all the documentation, we kind of pulled it out and just gave bits of information for people to follow. You know, if they want more information, they can go deeper into it.
Quentin, excuse me, can we reduce the size of the captioning box and pull it over to the left so that people can get a sense of what the
to the side,
the whole page looks like?
I do it like this.
If you can pull it down to the, yeah, that's perfect.
I mean, I appreciate the captioning because I can hear and read better, and other people hear as well.
Is that all
but
better?
The visual of the presentation of the
If you close
the
the
pages
window of the site over, it'll live next to it, and then people can see everything that's on the page.
It will shrink my screen down.
It will.
Yeah. It will shift my screen.
Yeah, so just make it as large as not the caption. Do you see what I'm saying? Or you could do it up and have that live at the bottom.
I see.
Yeah.
Can we, unless there are objections, can we suspend the captioning for this part of the presentation if there's no objections?
I think it's going to work out just fine. He's going to pull it almost all the way down, and then we'll get a wide view.
Winton, what would you prefer?
I think this would work.
You got to commit. We're committed to captioning.
Okay, so what this basically represents is everything that the council has in, let's say, their directives. But what we've done here is just basically put it in smaller, succinct, bite-sized information, so then people can sort of decide how much deeper into the website they need to go to get the information that they need. And here is what's called a call to action. One of the things that came out of the interviews was being able to have people join the council, bringing more younger people into the council. So on every page, you'll see this call to action with a link to the application. Here is a visual timeline of the history of the council, and what we plan to do with this is to put it alongside other events that happened in the city and around the country, just to have visual representation of the work. The Our Impact section, again, is just a small blurb of information. You can drill down into it by clicking to learn more about us. And at the bottom, again, another call to action to apply to join the council. Going to the About Us page, again, more information just about how the executive committee works with the Tri-County Steering Committee and DOH. And here, once this is actually complete, would be the pictures, names, descriptions of the executive committee. And hovering over it, you can see, you just get a blurb of who this person is and other like contact information. This is their Facebook or Twitter or what have you. We did sort of go over what information you can place there. It's really up to you. But the important part is that we get a full representation of the council. I don't know if I have this pulled up. Let me see if I can do this.
Are you taking questions as you go along? You want them at the end?
Probably at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. And here would be the full-on spread of the members. This is the membership page, and you'll see this calendar in many different forms, and it's just really for demonstration. But what this is now is just a week view of all the events of the Tri-County or of the steering committee. And clicking on these different drop-down menus will give you all the information for the event. You can add it to your personal calendars, add it to your Google Calendar, and that way you can get notifications when the event is upcoming. On the side is a nice little spotlight area. Any information or any members that you want to highlight, anything that's going on that you want people to get more information on, can live in this area here. Scrolling down, a description of the different committees of the council. And we have moved the online training here. It's really the same online training. This link just brings you to that website. And we've implemented your own sort of personal, private social network. The way that works is, if you are familiar with Facebook at all, it works similar to Facebook. It is not connected to Facebook. It's not connected to any other social platform. It lives within this site. And the reason why we took this direction was speaking to people from the Tri-County who said that we can't really get down to the meetings all the time, or we just want to keep up to date on what's going on. So this would give you sort of a back end area to speak to each other, to share information with each other on the site. And we are planning to also do these events are recorded, so we're trying to do a live stream so people who are in the Tri-County or outside or can't make these meetings can attend those meetings online, and that would happen in this module. On, we have, our impact page just talks all about the Ryan White services. You can't really see the image in the back, but all of these images will be kind of changed out once we we finalize which ones we want to go with. But this page breaks out all of the service directives into, again, bite-sized chunks. We've also linked what are called the standards of care documents, which kind of further break down the service directives so people can get that information as well. So what we want to see when we start monitoring all of this is the drill down. Like, you come to the page, you click on a button, we download the PDF, we know that that page is successful and it's working. We have here the calendars. Again, the Planning Council calendar, and this again is just one layout of the calendar. But again, these are all the dates for November on one page. Clicking on it will give you more information. We've implemented a community events calendar, and the difference here, see this is another layout of the calendar. The difference here is that you can now submit a new event if you are in the community and you want this to be, you want your event to be featured on the site. You can submit it here along with any attachments, and once approved on our end, it will show up on the community calendar. And the same functionality, you can add it to their calendar, their Google Calendar, what have you, and be reminded of it. What we've done with the meeting minutes, because there are so many in here, we've done what's called a mega menu, and hovering over it will open up the menu to the most recent minutes separated by committee. So you'll see here, you have the Needs Assessment Committee and you have Planning Council minutes. And clicking on those would bring you to another page here with all of the other related minutes and agenda items in this area here. Clicking on the service locator here would bring you, again, we didn't really change this at all. This would just bring you to the Public Health Solutions website. And what we've done with resources was pull all those links from all over the old website and added them to one page. We'll be going through this to see what is actually viable, what we can clean out, what we can keep. So that's the resources page. I'd like to talk about this little icon here. This is the accessibility icon, and that was a key want or need. Sorry. So clicking on that would open it up, and it has all these different options for people who are colorblind. You can change the contrast of the website to suit your need. Bigger text if you need it. You can read the website itself. I don't have a speaker.
So that's for...
Yes, so for visually impaired, I don't have sound. But basically, it would read exactly what's on the page. And here, we have worked in Spanish translation. So clicking on that will bring you to Spanish translation, and it would read it. I wish I did have a microphone because it reads it. There is, but I don't know exactly why it's not. So hold on one second.
But it will work.
It does work. I know that. I can't hear it again. We just can't hear it. But it speaks Spanish as like a native speaker would speak Spanish. It's not the robotic. It is real. It is sounds like a real person actually speaking. Let's see. So that is the overview of the website. What's next is really launching the website in December, early December, and trying to do user feedback with you guys. If you are interested, I'll definitely be reaching out to a lot of you or all of you. If you are interested, you can be a part of the focus groups. And we will be tracking this for the next 3 to 6 months, just to bring this website from where it is currently to what we think is, a more viable point in time. So, any questions?
Thank you, Wendy. Let's start with Rob.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, he said me first.
Oh,
Okay, all good. This looks great. I just started software engineering program, and I'm like excited by all the buttons you got and stuff. This is also the new ruling for accessibility, which is amazing that you did as well. I only have one real comment. The events that we do and the pull down we show weekly, that's great, but it's also good to see the month as well at a whole, so that way you know if you have any conflicts with your personal schedule. That's my only comment. Other than that, bravo job.
Thank you, and that's part of what we'll be getting into once we launch and get a lot of feedback. What should change, what shouldn't be.
John.
Yeah, also, fantastic job. I'm gonna go back to when you had the social media one. Will that be like audio also?
Yes.
So I can talk to the person that wants to talk to me or whoever, whatever. And how many people?
No, that wouldn't be the case. So you could be able to type or chat with that person.
That's it, it's just, so it's not gonna be like one of those audio as well as.
It's not Skype.
No, okay,
Yeah.
based on Skype, okay. Two, I have in the past have gone back to like really old minutes to look at things, to see what should have been done, what was maybe sidetracked and stuff like that. Will that still be able to be done here? Or those minutes are still be now, because they, last year's or the years before, they're totally gone now?
No, we'll have a link to the old website and everything will be archived.
Okay.
So you'll be able to click on that link and go to the old standard website.
Now, for those people that can't sleep at night or really like nothing on TV, these meetings are put on audio. Is there any place for that audio to be put on the website? So if somebody wants to sit there and re-listen to, because we do the minutes, but the minutes only do like highlights.
You really want to listen to a full council meeting again?
Sure, why not? I've done it.
Yes, we will be putting the digital files onto the website for your listening pleasure.
I will listen to them.
Just a quick point of clarification. Billy has had some multiple comments. Is there any time for people in the gallery to speak during?
It's generally public comment period. I mean, I do allow, but I'm just also paying attention to time. Go ahead, I guess. I'm gonna let Faye go next, and then I guess we'll let Billy go.
This is really great. Will this website also be able to be converted onto an app so that, and the app will be just interactive as well?
You're saying like a mobile on your phone application?
Yes. Instead of somebody have to log to the website to get it, is there an app? No, that's your login to the website. It's not.
It's not on your actual.
App, right.
It's not something that you download from the Play
Right.
Store.
Yeah, an app, yeah.
I don't think there's. I don't know if that's in the works. It's just a completely different.
But so you can think about how we can convert it to an app. Some people, it's easier just to get to an app if you're talking to certain people instead of to have to log into a website to do that. An app version.
Hold that thought. Hold that thought.
Well, so you
Actually,
can save websites onto your phone in the same way that you do apps, and we can definitely facilitate that, and instead of creating an application necessarily for this website, we can have it so that the icon appears on your tablet, on your phone, anywhere you want it, and you just click it and it launches. It will use your internet browser, but that is definitely possible, and we can find an easy way to make it happen, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's really just bookmarking the site on the front. Yeah, it's different.
It's different. I'm sorry. It's different.
Oh, it
Really?
is, but it's an app.
No, I think Melanie asked my question, because that's what I wanted to know. Could you have can I have an icon on my laptop and I can just click on it and go directly to the website? That's what I wanted to know, but you answered it already, so thank you.
Paul?
I think this is wonderful, especially, a couple months ago, we couldn't even find the event calendar. But also, kind of what they, and I know you said hold the question, or hold the thought, would be on, there's so many different silos of information out there, whether it's from a medical provider, a service provider, as well as an entry point for a consumer. And to become more user-friendly as well, would be at some point, could this transition to be like one site? Consumers can log in, service providers can log in, and they can communicate and see what's going on at other agencies, because I know up there's a resource area. But then, and if they need to like enroll or recertify in a program, they can do a data drop, save the agency some money on some staff, and data stuff. And then also, through the back door, like you have all your medical stuff, which is basically through Epic. It's kind of more advanced than what you're talking about, but that's like when I saw this, because the reason is, and Matt, I know you're about to cut me off, but there have been a handful of us, coincidentally, like the past couple weeks, we started talking about this. And, you know, agencies are kind of, you know, the medical community isn't, but consumers are in the dark. And at the end of the day, we're in business for consumers. And if we could bring them into this, it would be much more efficient. We could see more measurable outcomes and everything else that we're looking to gain in this council.
So, two things. One is money and one is a question. If we're going to have live streaming of this meeting, who will be able to access that live streaming? Everyone in public. What is the confidentiality of people around this table identifying?
At the beginning of the meeting. They were
Okay.
made aware of that.
Good. Now, this is really.
Well, just so you know, that camera right there, city law requires that all public proceedings are put on the web, so everything in this meeting is on YouTube.
Good. Well, I was concerned about those people who don't want to disclose their HIV status or sexual orientation.
Well, for the amount of years that you've been on here, it's been on YouTube.
For me, I don't care. I mean, I'm a veteran of it. I get a flying outside. But it could also be a deterrent for new people to join the council. For those people who may not want to come forward yet or comfortable. Now, the second thing is.
Wait, I want to stop you right there. These are public meetings. There is, we have to follow open meetings laws. We have to follow sunshine laws. So part of signing up and being on this council is being public. Now, we don't know who at this table is HIV positive or not. We don't know who at this table is LGBT or not, unless they choose to say that. We don't ask for that. We don't, you know, people are going to come into these meetings thinking that they're not a public meeting and they're a private meeting and nobody's going to hear what they have to say outside this room. They're wrong. This is like a city council meeting. It's public, it's being broadcast, it's being recorded, the minutes are available, the website here, it's all out there for the world to see. I would say a practice that we've had in the past with our consumer committee is that when we name people in the minutes of the consumer committee, we use their first name, not their last, unless they choose to be fully identified. That's the only circumstances that I would think that we would want to have, you know, some agreement about. Otherwise, you're here for the world to see.
So the next thing about the sustainability of this website, it is very difficult for people to access or this website I see in the future could be a place for resources. Organizations can have links to this website which they will pay for, because if people are going to the HIV Planning Council, if we have a funded agent and your name goes on the organization, when you click, you go to the organization which is marketing. They can pay in the long run to keep this website open and become fancy. And the millennial generation, they're all visual people. They don't read. The visual has to catch them, because if there's a sneaker for $1,800 snap, they're going to buy it. People like me go to the sales rack in the store. They don't shop like that. They shop because they see it and it looks good.
Are you saying you want to make money off of this?
It's sustainability. I'm not saying we make money, but the money that you get can keep continuously updating the website.
So, I'm going to be the timekeeper here. So there are 3 more hands up. It's 4:35. We're about 10 minutes behind our schedule. So I'm going to see there are 3 hands, and I'm going to close it down. I'm going to ask for the 3 hands if you need. Do you need to? Has your question already been asked? It's Lisa, Jeff, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting your name back there. So, Lisa.
Okay, yeah, I think that the news website is very engaging and colorful, because quite frankly, the last website looked a little morbid. I was playing around with the interactive map, and I am so happy to say we found Hudson Valley Services on the map. Thank you very much. Because I'd be feeling away, I'm just saying. So all this time that I've been sitting here, and I know that the camera is there, how come we have never been told that all sessions are on YouTube? Because I'm looking at it now. I would have liked to know that 3 years ago, 2 years ago, a year ago, 5 days ago.
I think that we have discussed that. We don't announce it at every single meeting, but you may not have been here when we talked about it.
And it is also a good thing that if you're missing a meeting, like, you know, we could tell people up in Tri-County who don't come here except for the 3 of us, that the meetings are on YouTube. It would have been good information to be able to share.
I agree.
Noted. Jeff?
I have a question about the intercommunication aspects of the website. Winston? Hi.
I'm sorry.
I have a question about the intercommunication ability within the website. So are you saying that people can communicate through the website with each other through a process like Messenger and Facebook?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's one-to-one?
Yes.
Will there be an ability for group chats?
Yes, there's a group as well.
So if there's a group chat process, is there going to be a facilitator or a moderator from the health department to make sure that it's being used appropriately?
David Klotz.
So the private network is only for people who are members or members of committee, and so if you do not uphold community standards, then you'll be sanctioned and removed. But I don't think that we need to police Jeff talking to Rob, talking to John, talking to Charmaine. We would like to see the development of a message board, an anonymous message board for PLWH that's larger than the council and is really, and so we're talking to Christina Rodriguez-Hart about how to develop something like that, and that would be moderated.
Thank you.
Thanks, I think this is an awesome website. I have 2 quick questions. One, the resources page is obviously really large and robust, and I think it might be helpful for us to be clear about how things get on and off of the resource page and who's going to do that and how things can get updated and whether or not we have any kind of formal relationship with the resources on that page. So that was one thing. And then I think it's fantastic how robust this is. It does look like it's going to take more staff time to maintain than the previous website, and I was just curious who or what the plan was for the ongoing maintenance and updating of the website.
Well, we are full service, so it's really up to the planning council if they want to outsource to us to do this, or we train the council to take care of the website itself. It looks council staff, yes.
David's already looking forward to another work duty.
Yeah, it does look, at first glance, it looks intimidating, but it really works like any word processor that you would come across. It's just learning how to use the website and where to put things in general.
Okay, so I'm looking at the time. We got 20 minutes left to this meeting, so Jan must talk for at least 45 minutes. So, if there's no more questions, anything urgent, I'm going to say thank you for a great presentation. So, Jan?
So, just like that Mickey Mouse song, now it's time to say goodbye. This is my last planning council meeting. I'm going to be retiring from government service on World AIDS Day. I've been in government service for off and on for 30 years. I come from a family that's been in government service. My father worked for the Department of Defense. My grandfather was a state senator. My great-grandfather was a vice president. It's in my DNA. I wasn't initially drawn to public service. I came to New York City in 1979 as a news reporter. But as a news reporter at that time, we began to collect stories of people who were dying of a mysterious disease. And pretty soon the entire newspaper was taken up with obituaries. And it was at a time when the New York Times would not go on record to discuss HIV or AIDS until Lawrence Altman wrote an article about it, and then it wasn't discussed again for a long time. The reason for that was the publisher, Abe Rosenthal, was homophobic. He hated gay people. He thought this disease was deserved. And so there was no public dialogue through that means. And so the small, tiny newspaper that I worked for, a gay paper, an LGBTQ paper, started publishing stories about this Mary's disease, the New York native. I came to become the managing editor of that paper at a time when nobody knew anything else about HIV and AIDS. And then the Los Angeles gay paper, the San Francisco gay paper, the Atlanta gay paper, the Chicago gay paper started to publish articles about HIV and AIDS. And because of that work, I came into contact with government indifference. I became frustrated by the then Mayor Ed Koch and the then President Ronald Reagan for not discussing or mentioning HIV or AIDS, and I became involved with ACT UP in 1987. So I was drawn into this, and one day at a demonstration outside of City Hall, with a group of people, ACT UP members, we had all chained ourselves together, and being chained together, and then having, like, we had these pipes that the police would have to, like, saw through in order to release us. We appeared to be a giant spider web of people that blocked the entrance to City Hall. And up comes Mayor Koch, and this was his last term, and I had worked on his campaign, so he was familiar with me. With his entourage, and press officers, and security details, and black SUVs screeching to a halt. And he was not going to go into City Hall through the back door. He was going to step over each of us to get into City Hall to go to work that day. So there we were, lots of press, laying down on the steps, chanting, "ACT UP, fight back, fight AIDS," at the top of our lungs. And indeed he did, with his staff, gingerly, step over all of these people laying on the steps of City Hall, including myself, until he got to me. And there he was, standing over me, and looked down and said, "Jan, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I don't like the way that you're dealing with the AIDS crisis, and that's why I'm here and all these other people are here." And he said, "Okay, come on inside. Come on inside and work with me in City Hall to address the AIDS crisis." And so a month later, there I was, sitting in front of him in City Hall. And he said, "Look, if you can agree with me 7 out of 10 times, we can work together. But if you agree with me 10 out of 10 times, you're no use to me." And so I agreed with him about 5.5 times out of 10. And we set up the Office of AIDS Policy. And we applied for Ryan White funding. And in 1991, we got our first award. And we were first of many cities in the country that received those awards. I have to say it was a horrible time. And I have to say I was pushing against forces that I did not understand. Forces of homophobia, forces of classism and racism that were ever present. But the most hurtful part came when I returned to ACT UP meetings, held in a room on the first floor of this building. And because I had switched sides, because I was now in government, because now I was perceived as part of the problem, the reason why people weren't getting help, people in the room stood up when I came in and yelled, "Traitor! Traitor!" And so for those of us who were in government at that time, that was the experience that we had. I didn't leave the meeting. I sat down. I continued to go to demonstrations. And yes, I got arrested. And of course, Mayor Koch said, "What? You're on the mayor's staff, you can't go out and get arrested." I said, "Yeah, but I'm a person living with HIV. And I get up every morning with HIV. And you're my boss now, but you're not going to be my boss in 2 years from now. And I'm being true to myself." And so that was all right. So it took us some time within government, but I found allies. I found people in Health and Hospitals Corporation. I found people in the Department of Health. I found people in other agencies, the Department of Education, who secretly we would meet with each other. And those of us who had any kind of stature or rank within the administration, when we had the moment to say something in a meeting, we did. And eventually it turned around. So I've had experience of working with a number of mayors. Mayor Koch, who in the 80s was so asleep at the wheel and so afraid of his own sexual orientation that he was not aggressive in dealing with AIDS. And as a result of that, I lost a lover, I lost a best friend, I lost a roommate, I lost more colleagues than I can recall. And then things changed. The Ryan White legislation was passed. Money started flowing into cities. And we had David Dinkins. And David Dinkins kept me in my position. Usually the mayor's staff is somewhere between 700 or 900 people serving the mayor. I was one of 5 of those people that was held over into the Dinkins administration. And we set up the Office of AIDS Policy, as I've mentioned, but I didn't agree with him 5.5 out of 10 times. We had a lot of disagreement. And my biggest disagreement with him during that administration was his position on syringe exchange programs. He did not allow them the first 2 years of administration. So what happened? Me and other members of ACT UP, we went out onto the streets, and every weekend we would stand out on the streets in the Lower East Side in some pretty rough neighborhoods and pass out clean syringes, and we would be arrested. And eventually, because of my arrests, because he received a notification that a member of the mayor's staff was arrested passing out needles on the corner of Avenue D, it came to his attention. And we had a chance to sit down and have a conversation about it, and he changed his position. And then Mayor Giuliani came into office. And I didn't agree with him 5.5 out of 10 times. I probably agreed with him about 1 out of 10 times. And so our positions with each other were not very cordial. So I left city government. I enrolled in Harvard. I went to the Kennedy School of Government. I studied health policy for 2 years with Jonathan Mann, who at the time was the global director for the UN AIDS. He was killed in a plane crash shortly after I graduated. But I got the vocabulary that I needed. I got the degree that I needed in order to have some substance and weight behind living with HIV and AIDS activism, and I came back to work in Washington. I worked at the National Association of People with AIDS for 3 years. I went to different states. I worked in the Ryan White Part B program and did a lot of technical assistance until I was hired at the Westchester County Health Department. I worked there for 3 years, and I staffed the Tri-County Steering Committee. And I brought back to the council the stories that you are now sharing, are hearing from members that are sitting at this table from the Tri-Counties. And I wrote papers, and I gave presentations at conferences about suburban AIDS. 52% of the people in this country live in suburbs. People don't think about HIV and AIDS in those terms, or at least they didn't at that time. And I began to write about it. and share that story. And so that's why I'm so adamant about having people at this table from those counties that are north of us, and I'm happy to see that day has come. Michael Bloomberg was elected mayor. Michael Bloomberg brought me back into city government, and I began to work at the Department of Health, where I've been until this day. And now we have a mayor, Bill de Blasio. And ironically, Bill de Blasio and I were cube mates at City Hall under David Dinkins. He worked with Mayor Dinkins at the time. So that is probably the reason why I'm sitting here today in this chair. But first and foremost have always been the fact that I'm a person living with HIV. And I know what it's like to get up in the morning with HIV and go to bed with HIV. And I know what it's like to interact with the medical system. And I know what stigma is like. And I know what activism is. And how you and why you need to have people outside yelling, knocking on the door, marching, demonstrating, laying in the streets. But you also need people inside. Because all the shouting in the world outside that window is not going to change policies unless you have allies inside government. So when I started working in government, I shared that with my father, and my father was sort of a snicker in his voice because he had always encouraged me to do that. It was in the early 80s, and in the early 80s I had mentioned to him the AIDS crisis and eventually ending up in government, and my father said, do your best. 30 years later, I still feel like I'm doing my best. And I think that each of you at this table need to bring your best game to this work. And that's why earlier in today's meeting I was so determined to show you the things that were lacking in that presentation, to show you the questions that you can ask, that you have the ability to ask here once you learn the tools of doing that. So I need to thank a lot of people, and I want to begin with my higher power. I would not be able to do this work without having that faith. I want to thank people who are living with HIV, who have been behind me and encouraged me to do this work. I want to remember those that we have lost. I want to thank David Klotz, Melanie Lawrence, Jose Colon Verdecia, Judith Kirkland, my planning council staff. I want to thank my boss, Dimitri Daskalauskas, who has never doubted me, even when I've come into his office with some pretty crazy ideas. He's encouraged me and lifted me up. I want to thank Graham Harriman, who's been a colleague in the truest of senses, even in the moments when we butted heads. I want to thank Amber Casey for riling me up in a way that I had to prove my point to her in order for us to get along. Ashley and Scott, who are on the care and treatment team. I want to thank Joan Edwards and Claire Simon. They're not here today, but they're from the Department of Health, and they've been with us since the start. I want to thank Bettina and Gucci from Public Health Solutions, always a purveyor of information that we need to make decisions. I want to thank our technical support team. None of this would have been possible. Our caption are here today. None of this would have been possible without them. And I want to thank Matthew. Matthew and I have been friends for a long time. He's very goofy. But he's a lot of fun to be with. And when we're in Washington, or whether we're in, one time we went to a conference in San Diego, and it was really boring.
I told him to skip the speech and go to the beach.
He did, and went to the beach, and God forbid, I'll probably get $10 knocked out of my pension. But he's always made it fun, and so try to make it fun. Make it the fun as you possibly can, and I really appreciate Matthew having done that for me. So what's next for me? I'm going to be working for 2 consulting groups, one based in Boston and one based in Washington. And they have contracts with Hersa to provide technical assistance. And I've been working for them for a bit of time. I'll just do a little bit more of that. I go to other cities and I teach them what we do here. So I work with other planning councils. So far I've worked in Boston, Washington, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Detroit, Austin, San Antonio. And every year I get a list of cities to work with come March 1st, and I'll be doing more of that. But I'll also be doing more of what I love. Being with my friends, cooking a meal, walking my dog for more than 15 minutes.
Dog's getting confused.
And I'm happy and I'm healthy, and I thank God that I'm alive today because of the work that people like you have done. And so I'm going to say farewell. I hope to see you soon. I hope our paths cross again. And it's been an honor to be here.
So 2 council meetings ago, when I thought it was his last meeting, I did a lot of goodbye words, so I'm not going to repeat them. I'm actually going to allow, because I always hog the microphone, I'm going to allow other people here who, if they want to say anything before we adjourn, because I feel like I already gave my goodbye speech to him. Steve.
John, I don't know if you remember this conversation, but you were one of the people who I came to when I wanted to do my master's degree. And David helped me to write that recommendation. And because we shared so much, when I came to this council, I had nothing. I've been serving on this planning council on and off for 16 years. And people like you.
Thank you. Lisa.
Okay, this is really bittersweet, because every time I look at the front of the room, I'm going to really miss seeing you there, Jen. I really believe that, not to put anything on anybody that follows your footsteps, but you're kind of irreplaceable. Yeah. Meeting you, and I promise you, I would have never ever considered being on a council. I'm a private person, and this was not where I saw myself. But you have enriched my life so that I can use the voice of advocacy that I've used for housing and education, racism, in the same way that I can be a voice for those that are voiceless. So having someone in my life like you to enrich this work that we do has been a phenomenal blessing, and you're going to be very missed. I wish you all the best. They're going to be blessed to have you wherever you go, but it's going to be a little bittersweet looking to the front of the room and not seeing you there.
So I know we're almost out of time, but go ahead, Paul, and then see Melanie.
Jan, I met you actually back at the early days of ACT UP, and you were like really much more active at it than I was. But I was also brought back to, A, the work we've done on the council, but to my interview, it was with Saul and Billy. And you looked at me and you just said, are you going to ask the questions and stand up for the people that need to? And I just remember, and I said yes. But I also, I'm also going to see you in the neighborhood, walking your dog and running into you, and I look forward to those moments as well. And thank you for your service.
So a lot of people don't know that I actually interviewed for the Planning Council. It was the second city interview that I had, and I had taken the first job break. So I went just to check them out. And it was a whole room full of Planning Council members, which isn't intimidating at all. And Jan started talking about the work, and I was like, oh my gosh, I dodged a bullet. Like, he knows everything. I don't know if I'm ready. And I can't tell you how happy I am that the Planning Council kept saying, you know, still got that position. You know, you could apply. And during the second interview, I have to tell you that Jan intimidated the hell out of me again. But I have never enjoyed working for someone as much as I enjoy working for you. You allowed me to spread my wings and fly, and you were like, oh, you hit your head, and you know, yeah, watch out. So thank you, Jan. Thank you for trusting myself and the staff to do the work, and for you to set the vision, and for us to uphold it and roll it out. And it's been such a pleasure, and I've learned so much. Thank you for making me ask more questions, as though I don't ask enough. Thank you.
I see, go ahead.
Hello, okay. So I've known Jan since he was the Deputy Assistant Commissioner under Marjorie Hill. And then I actually worked with him when he was kind of over both the Planning Council staff and the what is now the HPG staff, where we were the Provincial Planning Group, and that's when I was with that group. And I can remember when he would speak out at the PPG meetings, and he was very inspiring, and then he allowed me to come into this group and to work and see the tremendous work that's being done here. So I wish him the best. It doesn't matter that he didn't mention my name with the rest of the staff. That's okay. But I wish you the very best, and I know you're going to enjoy your time, and you will continue to inspire. You will continue to be that fierce advocate that you are. And I'm not sure how it goes, but usually when you leave city service, you can't show up for a whole year. I don't know if that still applies, but when you do decide to grace this group with your presence again, I hope you see some growth and continued growth, and that you're proud with what has gone forward.
Go ahead, Rob.
So what happens next? Who's going to be in the seat? Who's going to be guiding me along with Matthew? It's yet to be determined. A posting for my position is in the works. It will be posted shortly. There will be a national search. Hopefully that they'll find a good replacement. Matthew will be here. He's consistently been here, and he will be here throughout the rest of the year. David, Melanie, and Kimberly, and Jose will continue to work for the council staff. Darryl Wong, who's been on leave, will be returning. He is the deputy, so he may be filling this chair for some period of time. If not that, David, who's the senior member of staff, will be in this position until someone will be appointed to be the governmental co-chair.
Randall? No, unfortunately, we do need to wrap it up. Go ahead, Randall.
It's been a pleasure to watch you. When I first started on the council, even before I became a council member, I was afraid of you. No, literally I was, because I saw the way he challenged the people on the council. And then I said, oh, I like that. That's one of the things that made me join the council. He has given us a challenge, and he has always given us a challenge so that we can do the best we can for those who can't do for themselves. It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoy the rest of your life, and I hope you live a very long life, because I hope to see you. That's the best thing there is for me to hope for, to see you after you've gone, and to know that you're doing well. Because you have challenged me, you've challenged, I'm sure, a lot of people in this room to be better than they are. Not only to be better than they are for themselves, but to be better than they are for the people whom we serve. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think that's a great way to close this. Since I have the microphone, I guess I'm allowed to have a little bit of last word, but I will say what? Oh, Billy, please go, by all means.
First of all, Jen, I want to say one thing. I remember one year it was Christmas time, and I said, well, Jen, you're going to go off and enjoy yourself and have a wonderful Christmas. To me, the Christmas of Thanksgiving. But I remember you saying, no, Billy, I'm not, because all of my friends don't have money to do it as much as I do. So I'm going to cook a dinner and let all my friends over. And that's just, I mean, it really touched me. That showed the type of person that you are. And the fact that when you appointed me as co-chair, and I had just had a stroke maybe about 2 years, and you appointed me co-chair, and I was like, yeah, I can't do it. I can't talk. I can talk. You said, yes, you can. And so you believed in me.
I just have to say, Jen and I have had our moments of conflict, but they've always been, I know, with the right heart at him. And I'm not even going to say goodbye to him because I've invited him over for our Thanksgiving dinner on Saturday. So, I think in a lot of ways, this working together has actually made us better friends. And so I don't say goodbye, I say see you Saturday. Are there any public comments before we close this? Okay, thank you everybody. Have a good turkey day.